Okay, today we are going to paint the dunes. I've had people think that they reminded them of home in Ireland. They look like the dunes on Lake Superior, and I've even had someone mention that it was their home in Florida, that these dunes. So they'll go just about any body of water that you want. To start out with, you're going to have to sketch in just the dune line, 2 edges, and you're going to want a pathway that reaches over onto the beach. Also, if you want, for putting in the fence, you can put in a pencil line. Do not draw in the shape of the fence post. Just draw the pencil line where you're indicating the fence to go. And as you apply your masking fluid, you'll just follow it along the edge of the line, and that'll help give you a space. But if you're trying to fill in with masking fluid, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I didn't draw in the lines, I'm sorry, but just kind of add a little bit of a variation. This one's kind of been there for a while. The sand is shifting. And then I actually have another set here in the background. You want to have them go over the edge of the sand. One nice thing when you're lifting the masking fluid, especially if you're using that masking lifter, the little crepe eraser thing, it actually erases pencil lines. And then I'll just clean off the tip of my palette knife, kind of play with this, make it into a little ball as it dries. And then we'll let this dry and move on to paint the sky. So I already have one that I've done. You can see the masking fluid is dry. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the sky. Now to do that, you're going to use cerulean blue. I've gone ahead, if you have your paint already in a palette like I do, I'll take my mister, then I'll go in, and again, like I've said before you do anything else to the paper, you've got to make sure your paint is ready. So we're going to get our cerulean blue out, which we're using for the sky. Just get some of that out on the palette, make sure it's blended, there's no little clumps of mysterious paint in there. And then I'm going to take my, just a larger paintbrush just because it makes it easier. I don't have to wash the paint out of my flat brush. And I'm going to go ahead and get the sky wet. Doesn't have to be soaking, but you do want to have it moist, so it'll down the sky to the horizon. If you want to have more paint, if you want it stronger, remember it does dry a little bit lighter. Go ahead and grab some more paint. Just kind of stroke this back and forth. You can see at first there's a little bit of a stroke line going on, but it will, as it dries, kind of soften up and dissipate. You won't notice it. What I've done is I'll take my paper towel and I'm going to work on a little cloud line along the back in the distance, like there's something coming up here you don't know. Weather-wise, if you want some little like stratus clouds or whatever, where you just kind of drag them across, get some area of puff, and then you can always drag your clouds along and just let the water and paint do its own thing. So I've got some high sky clouds going on here. And you're going to want to let that dry, and then we'll move on to painting our shrubs and grasses behind the dunes, dune grasses, the sages and things like that. To do that, we're going to work with a natural sponge and a fan brush. So I've gone ahead here and I have an area that's already been painted. It's fairly dry. Using your fan brush, what I've done is I'll go ahead and get it from the store, but I will give it a little bit of a haircut. So it's not just a perfectly smooth, it's a little bit more organic in texture. I'll take a scissors, like you're giving someone a little bang trim, and cut in a few, and you can see where I've got some of these. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip it into my sap green paint. Now I have added water. If you're using a sponge and it's a little too wet, your paint is too wet, just tap it on a little more lightly, because you don't want to have it all bled together by getting on the shrubberies here. So the harder I push, see, the stronger it is. And if you just do it lightly, you get more of a lighter fleck to it. But I'm going to give it a little bit more of a push here, because that paint on there is great. It's a little more thick, which is actually easier, I think, better to work with. I'm going to go ahead and put it into my water container and clean off that excess paint. And next I'm going to go into my raw sienna. Now it's going to be more wet. I can hear it already, so I'm going to try and work with this a little more lightly so I don't blend it in too much. But see, I'm adding just another dimension in there by adding it. You would just sort of build that over the edge of the dune, up into the sky, give some of your color. It's going to get a little bit more intensity there. That's going to stay soft. But see, now I've kind of added that in, the texture, which is fun using the sponge. And next, after I've washed this color off and wrung it up a little bit, you're pretty much finished with your sponge. I'm going to pick up and I'm going to go into my sap green again, And like any paintbrush, you can really work it into your paint, it's just fine. And I'm going to use this by flicking it at my wrist, starting a little bit at the base of where I want these grasses to be, and I'm going to just kind of pull some of them up over the tops of the shrubs here. This is a little too. Now that we've had a chance to let the grasses and the sage ahead and kind of set in our path, and to do that we're going to take a little bit of neutral tint. And actually I should back up here just a little bit to make it a little easier. We're going to go ahead and put in a little stripe of water on either side of our pathway. It'll make it easier to blend the paint when you first put it on. I don't want you to get panicked putting in this dark color, but we're going to stroke that along the edge, and that's kind of just setting in as you walk down onto the dune into the water. So I'm going to take a little bit, just a clean brush, and draw some of that out. Oops. It's a little messy there, just lift it off. Okay. There we go. Clean that out a little bit. There. All right, now we're going to let that dry. And once we've gotten that dry, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our water, and we're going to develop the sand and the beach a little bit more too. Now, in working with the water, normally what I'll do is just deepen the color that I've used in the sky. So in our sky we had used cerulean blue. I'm going to go ahead and get that blue paint wet again, but then I'm going to grab a little bit of Antwerp blue just to kind of deepen the color a touch. And you're going to start up towards the horizon line. And if it's easier for you, go ahead and draw on a light pencil line, but we're going to go ahead and drag the water along the edge of the sky there on the horizon, pick up a little bit of water, and use that to start blending the water, the color of the water down. I'm going to go ahead and at angles leave a few little white gaps. We're going to put in just a few curling waves here. And we'll go back and do those little details when they've dried. But you want to leave a little bit of white. If you want to have them coming straight in on your beach, you can do that. If you want to have them at an angle like I've done, go right ahead. If you just want to leave it plain, you can too. You don't have to, but it's just kind of a fun little detail to add there. So now we've had this in. If you come back in and you've gotten too strong a blue, go ahead and just sort of dab off a little bit with your paper towel. It helps just sort of transition your greens to the blues. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up a little bit of my burnt umber and bring it out on the palette again to make sure it is, I don't have any little clumps of paint. Kind of water it down a little bit. I'm going to follow along this pencil line, and I'm going to use this. This is the beach down towards the water. So I'm doing this line. You want to keep a nice clean edge here because it helps draw you into the painting and bring you down into the beach. And I'm just going to use a little water here to sort of soften that color out towards the water. You can have it overlap a little bit. I don't know if you noticed when I finished the water I did just a little bit of a line of, when I finished painting in the water I used a little water just to loosen it up and soften it, and then these colors can kind of blend and play together. While we let that dry, I'm going to go ahead and grabbing my 1-inch brush, make sure it's wet. You're going to grab the raw sienna that we used in our seagrass and things along the fence line, and starting at the outer edge of the painting, you're basically going to put on the color and use water to draw it up so it lightly fades into white of the paper to kind of draw you in this path along the dunes and over the dunes. So we're just kind of stroking in some water to help blend that. Make sure you're using clean water because then you don't end up with any sort of an interesting ridge or line as you get towards the end there. But see how I'm gradually just letting it fade away. And remember, when you paint this on initially, as it dries, it's going to lighten up a little bit for you. But we're just going to bring that up to the edge and leave it fade to white, and then that kind of draws you into the painting, and then you walk down over the dune a little bit and you're onto the beach. Now you can go ahead, because we've gotten the other grasses in here, and put a little bit of that color in along to color in the sand in the background here too. Just apply your color, use some water to help draw it out. You sort of want to start at the outer edge of your paper with the color because it helps frame the painting. It helps keep if people are looking at it or if you're looking at your painting, kind of circled in, doesn't let it wander off the page. So you want your little darker color along the edge, and then we'll just fade it into almost nothing as we go towards the center of the painting. So again, just grabbing water and blending the paint in a little bit more as we go to the fence. You want to be careful not to paint too much onto the paint you've already applied. It can possibly, depending on how heavy it is, make it bleed and blend a little bit further. Then you need to have that done. All right, now along on this side, you can see I've started just a little bit with a little of the burnt sienna. You can use burnt sienna, a little heavier neutral, something in there. What I'm trying to depict is when you're coming down onto a beach, a lot of times there's like some roots and things like that coming out of the dunes as the sands are shifting, so it's a little discolored. So we're going to add just a little interest by adding a little bit of a darker color in here to give it some depth, a little bit more interest. And I put the color on and just kind of washing some water around with it. I'm going to grab just a little bit more here to get just a little bit more strength. Oops, maybe a little too much strength. Again, I've got my trusty paper towel. I'm going to lift that off a little bit. But it's kind of fun because even in the water, it's giving it a chance to move around and blend a little bit to get it to just sort of look a little more organic and soft. So is it, yeah. Our water here is pretty dry. What I'm going to do now, and actually I'll use my round brush here because it comes to a nice point. And if you feel a little bit more comfortable, you can always grab that 6-inch or number 6 brush that we'd used earlier on another painting. But I'm going to go ahead and just pick up my neutral. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of exaggerate where these white lines are, following along the base to add a little bit of a shadow to make it look like it's a wave crashing in on itself here, a little crest here. So I'm just bringing a little bit of that neutral tint, then clean off your brush, and with just water, you can drag that along a little bit. But see, it's just kind of giving a little bit more interest to the wave. Instead of having just a smooth blue lake or ocean out here, we're making it look like we've got a few waves crashing here. So again, I'm going to put in a little bit of that neutral, take just water, and move it along the edge to kind of soften so it's more of an edge of color instead of an outline of color. And see, it just gives that little effect of wave rolling over on itself there. Okay. And if you have a little bit stronger and you're not sure about it, just go in while it's still moist and you can dab off and take off some of that. You can always go back in and build up the depth of the color a little bit more. What I'm going to do here, let's see. Okay, kind of shifting things around here a little bit. All right, what we're going to work on next is and actually, you might want to end up clipping some of this out because I'm kind of going backwards here, so I'll talk a little bit and I'll let you do that, but I need to go in and about this, moving ahead of myself on the wrong samples. So. Actually, I may just pull back on this one because it's going fairly quickly, so let's just do that. Okay. Now the next step, when your sand is dry and you feel comfortable that it's dry enough, go ahead and we're going to work out a little bit on building some depth in between the fence posts, kind of make it look a little darker, get some different variation in color, and that'll help add some interest to your painting, kind of pull you in a little bit more so it's not too flat. What I've done is I'm taking some Antwerp blue and some of my sap green and I'm blending it on my palette. And then I'm going to go in and between some of these, and it doesn't even have to be avoided because you've got your masking fluid on, but put some of that dark color in here and cleaning off your brush again, just using a damp brush after I've dabbed it off, go ahead and soften the edges, and it kind of helps make this color dissipate in without too many hard lines into the background here. But what we're doing is we're trying to help pull the viewer or yourself into your painting a little bit more by adding some dark in here. Helps pull in and make it not such a flat texture, flat color. We want to have a little bit more depth, a little variation in our colors. I'm going to go ahead and do this over on the other side also, kind of develop my areas. You can, what we'll do also, as soon as this dries, is we'll be putting in some more grass detail on the front, and we can wait and do it while, you can do some while the fence is still on the masking fluid, or we can also wait and do it after we've lifted it off so it looks like some of the grass is forward in front of the fence posts and help plant those in a little bit better. But I'm going to go ahead and add some dark in here too. blue. A little bit more with some green. There we go. I'm using my paper towel to dab off some excess paint color. Take care of that. Okay. See, I was able to bring a little bit of that down, whether there's just a texture variation. I have a little bit of a sand pile up around there. There we go. Add some interest to that texture. Okay, now what we're going to do is all right, what you want to do is wait for the paint to dry around those fence posts. Sorry. Just trying to figure out how to do this because I jumped ahead and I have to let that dry. I didn't get myself prepped on that very well. Let's see if I can get these lifted. We'll be able to do this a little bit. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lifter here and I'm going to start pulling the masking off of the fence that we put in here, our little snow fence or sand fence, I guess. And pull that off. You're going to want to make sure the paint in between that you've put on is completely dry. Here you can see it's just a little damp, so I'm being a little careful as I'm pulling this masking off my posts. Otherwise, when you do that, you're going to start, if you're rubbing this back and forth, you'll possibly smear the paint into your white post. But see how they start to stand out, which is kind of fun. And we're going to go in and put in a little wire to hold them. Finish up with some grasses at the bottom. So you can see it comes off fairly easily. One more to go. Here we go. All right. Now that we've removed all the masking, we're going to go ahead with our round brush again, and this time we're going to pick up just some of the neutral tint. You don't want it real heavy. You want to make sure it's blended out with some water. You want it light enough. Just have to determine which way you want to have basically your sun coming in onto your beach. Here it's not real specific or real exact, so what I'm going to do is just pick one side of my fence posts and start shading them a little bit just to give them a little dimension too. So I'm going to take a light wash of color down the side of my fence off. I just like to because it helps dry it more quickly. Let's see, it's just a little bit there to show that it's not just a flat post. It's giving just a little edge to these little wood slats that they use for the fencing. And it helps them to stand out a little bit more too in the grasses. So I'll go ahead and do that across the whole fence. Let's just add interest there. A few more. All right, now grabbing your round brush again, either the number 10 or your number 6, you're going to want to go in with just a little firmer bit of neutral tint, and we're going to work on connecting our beach fence here. So I'm going to go ahead and give just a little bit of a curve, a little bit of a C on a couple of the posts here, and that's where you're going to connect your wires that comes across. See. Doesn't have to be perfectly black line. You've got some grasses that can be coming across through there. Just bring that down across your fence. If you've got a higher fence you're working with, go ahead and put in some double lines. And in this case, you may have less of the wire showing because of the fact it's down so low, and you might have some growth or whatever coming through on here with the grasses too. And we'll just act like there's something that's been buried down in the sand there. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. Again, just a couple little C's to sort of give you some direction. Oop, that one got a little strong there. And bring your wire across to your fence posts. And I give them just a little curve because then that again gives it a little dimension that it's not just flat. There is something to these pieces of wood that they're using on the fence, the slats there. And again, put some more here. All right, there we go. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is again grabbing my, I'll use both my fan brush and my round brush just to put in a little bit of some texture in front of the fences here. Lightly, you know, again, like I said, flick that up, give a little twist, but see you can get some grasses down here in front, just to kind of give it a area to sit and not actually be floating out there. A little bit more in here. Some grasses that are coming up through this area. What I like to do with my round brush then is kind of go in and either you can use it to sort of blend or soften some of these edges, kind of give it a touch of a shadow, plant them in a little bit yourself too, or you can go ahead and grab some paint. I'm going to do a little bluey green just to deepen it up a little bit. You can go in and just do some of your own little, oops, getting a little heavy-handed there. Put some grasses in here too, get some vegetation. Same thing over here. My brush up a little bit and get some grass going in there, some greens, kind of buried down there in the sand. Lift it up just a little bit. Just squiggle your brush quickly up and down. It gets the grasses. I find sometimes it helps just to work a little more quickly, not to think too much about what you're doing, and you get a better effect than if you really work hard to go, oh my gosh, it's not exactly perfect. It just helps to kind of quick flick your brush around and you usually get a really neat effect just in doing that. So, all right. Well, that pretty much finishes this painting. If you'd like, you could always put in a seabird or two in the sky there. Again, I should have my okay, with your smaller round number 5 or 6 brush, go ahead and pick up some of that neutral. And if you want to put in a couple little birds up in the sky, a couple different ways to do it is, let me flip here and show you. We can work with little check marks, kind of, and get your birds in there. Just softly checking them off, not too short on one side. Or what I like to do too is M's. So you can see how you're doing that. So I'm going to go ahead. That's a couple different ways of doing birds. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of M's in here. And they can be swooping and flying, however you want to have them. I like to work odd numbers, so I'm going to put in 3. You can do 3, 5, 7. Something about odd numbers of objects just help in keeping people from trying to compare and break things down. It just keeps things a little more organic in having them odd numbers. But there you go, that is June.